I'm kind of taking my time in getting back into foreign languages. French, I'll start it Monday. Today is Thursday. I know that some years the days of the week won't line up the same way, but for me it'll be better to make a clean start on Monday. So that'll be the 115th day of my class is when I'll start French. Today I want to say a little bit more about what I was saying yesterday, and maybe just one video, I don't know. For one thing, vala, that's another one of those words for those irrigation channels that I was talking about. That's the word that's used in southern Austria, in the Tyrol. And from it you get the word Valer, or a waller, a Valer. He's a guy that takes care of such irrigation ditches, and possibly the family name Waller. Now I mention that because ironically, in my own family history, there are wallers, and I always thought, well, they must have been people who built walls. Well, if they came from England, maybe, but if they came from Germany, maybe they did what I do. Well, that's kind of personal and doesn't necessarily apply. But that is one more word that deals with the kind of water management which was my subject yesterday. Court, that's where we get our word courtesy, and I don't know if I pointed that out. Courtesy was the behavior that was expected at the court. You took off your helmet, you took off your war helmet when you went into the presence of a king. Well, because of that, you're supposed to take your hat off in the presence of a lady. It's cold down here, so I'm leaving it on. Courtesy isn't what it once was. We're probably lucky, I don't know. Romantic love, I'm not willing to leave that just yet. I called it courtly love yesterday, and that's where you would find it on Wikipedia. But it also could be called romantic love, and it is so much part of us. Even though in some ways it seems absurd, it seems almost ridiculous where it started, it is so much part of us. We have this idea that when you marry, ideally you fall in love with somebody, and then you marry the person out of love. Well, that's a fairly new idea. I mean, marriage for convenience or land ownership or joining of families was much more common than this idea of falling in love with somebody. And in a lot of ways you could argue it doesn't work that well because the romance can fade and it becomes a problem. But it is part of us. I mean, I don't. When I was teaching my students in school, I'm sure in general they would not want to give up on that idea that you fall in love. That's romantic love. Well, romances, that word can mean the love itself. It can also mean this host of stories in the Middle Ages that were about romantic love. These medieval romances. Nowadays, romances, they'll be called nowadays, are novels about that which are so tremendously popular to this very day. In Shakespeare's time, this is some 300 years later than, say, the Epic of the Cid, or maybe 500 years later. By that time, I think you can see that it's there. You can't see it, I don't think. If you look at, say, the Old Testament, the Bible, the Old Testament, Jacob's feeling for Rebecca, or Rachel rather, was that romance? I don't think. And David lusting for Bathsheba, that wasn't romance either. It's sort of hard to find it if you go that far back. But by Shakespeare's day, I think you can see it. Juliet and Romeo. That seems to be that crazy, almost insane kind of love. Not just sexual desire, but love. I mean, they die for each other. I think you can see it maybe in Antony and Cleopatra, perhaps. I'm dealing with Shakespeare, some of the famous lovers from Shakespeare. When Benedict in Much Ado About Nothing declares to Beatrice, "I do love nothing in the world so well as you," that seems to be romantic love. And we're going to come to a period called the Romantic period. In maybe a month and a half, in this course I will have reached that. And I'm going to try to explain a period in the literature and the arts and music called the Romantic period. Boy, is that a hard one to explain. That word, it comes from the word Roman. And it starts way back there. All right, well, Don Quixote, I should mention it. I don't know it very well. I've never read the whole thing. An extremely famous book to come out of Spain, and it is about this subject. In Don Quixote, some people call it the first novel, or the greatest novel. It's very old. It was written about 500 years ago, maybe 400 years ago. In it, a character kind of flips out on courtly love and chivalry and that attitude. He kind of goes crazy with it. He reads too much about it. There's some farm girl, poor farm girl, that he decides must be his lady. Even though she doesn't feel much like a lady, he must have a lady. I'm pointing you in the direction of it if you're interested. My daughter has read the whole thing. I don't know if I will. Now, the Song of Roland, okay, I want to mention it. The Song of Roland is going to take us into French. This is also an epic. It could be called the French epic. Just like I said that the poem of the Cid can be called the Spanish epic, Beowulf, the English epic. Well, the Song of Roland, there's a connection to Spain and the Arabs, because it is one of these medieval poems that were sung about heroes, and Roland is ambushed as he's going through the Pyrenees Mountains back into France, I think it is, and he's killed. He's reluctant to blow his horn. He waits the very last minute to finally blow his horn, but it's too late for them to save him. I did sort of read it. I've studied it. I always thought, why didn't he blow his horn? but anyway, he waited. But I want to mention it, and I also very much want to mention this. Yesterday, I watched a modern movie called The Way. It's not a famous movie. It stars Martin Sheen. It was made in 2010. I stumbled across it, really, because I was looking into Santiago de Compostela, which is a city in northern Spain. I recommend it in a way. There's a pilgrimage, and this I also didn't know until maybe 10 or 15 years ago in my fairly long life. I didn't realize that one of the most famous pilgrimages, journeys that people make for religious reasons in Europe, was to this city called Santiago de Compostela in the corner of Spain, the northwestern corner of Spain. Well, The Way is about a man who makes this pilgrimage because his son had died trying to make it, so he makes it for him. Well, and I guess I recommend it. It's not famous, but I have my own personal reasons for wanting to watch it, because this May I'm going to be traveling, not on foot, but I'll be traveling on the train in that very way, and I want to go to visit Santiago de Compostela. But in it, there's one part, if you would see it, that they allude to El Cid, they allude to the Song of Roland, they get involved in an argument about who really killed Roland, because there's a Basque. I don't know how well you know your geography, but there's part of Spain called the Basque, and that was where this attack occurred. I even suspect in that movie that there was an allusion to Don Quixote, because at one scene there's all these windmills on a hilltop, and one of the most famous things about Don Quixote is, having lost his mind, he charges windmills thinking they're monsters with his lance. He tries to joust with windmills. So I'm sharing that with you. And tomorrow I've still got one other thing I want to touch on. Touch on before we then turn to French. So a little short today. That's fine. See you tomorrow, I hope.